Hi everybody, thanks for coming back. Welcome to Lime Life and True Beauty with Biffy Ipple. I want to thank you all for your support and for coming back. How are you guys doing today? I know there's been a lot of changes into the quarantine life, and so I hope you guys are being productive and resting at the same time. I've got a really interesting, controversial topic to talk about today, and I hope it doesn't have to get in that direction, but unfortunately it is a controversial topic. But before I get to that, I have a few announcements. First of all, if you haven't checked out my Linktree yet, which is in my Instagram profile in the link, you can click on it and you'll see that I have several links. One of them is for Lincoln Cooper's GoFundMe, and the other one is for my Lime Life shop. Now, Lincoln Cooper is a son of a friend of mine. Her name's Cassandra Cooper, and her and I work at Lime Life together. And basically, earlier this month, her son Lincoln Cooper was diagnosed with leukemia. I had decided at that point for the month of July, any kind of earnings that I made, for 50% of those proceeds to go to Lincoln Cooper's treatment. Currently, Lincoln has been doing chemo, and if you want to follow Cassandra Cooper's story, I will put in the link of what her Instagram is as well as her Facebook, so you can see how Lincoln is doing, how her family is doing. It's been quite a road and a journey for them, and so I know that your positive vibes and your prayers are something that the Cooper family, covets. So again, if you go into my Linktree, you'll see Lincoln Cooper's GoFundMe, and you'll also see my Lime Life shop. Take a click on my Lime Life shop, check it out. You'll see some great products for skincare, for makeup. It's vegan, it's natural, it's free of harsh chemicals, and I've had so many friends just give great testimony to the products that they've purchased, how it's really changed their skin, it's changed their life. And so not only will you be able to get a great skincare product or makeup product for yourself, it'll also benefit Lincoln Cooper and his family. So take a look at my Lime Life shop to help support them in that way. Another thing that there's still time to enter is my Christmas in July giveaway. Now, in order to enter this giveaway, you actually have to directly DM me, and then I'll give you the information on what you need to do to get into the giveaway for Christmas in July. So please go ahead and DM me. I will again put in the comments my Facebook and my Instagram profile, so that those are two ways that you can contact and get a hold of me. Alright, now on to the topic. As a lot of you know, last week in my Thankful Thursday post, I posted that I am officially going to be trained as a parent coach under PCI, which is Parent Coaching Institute. And I am so excited for this opportunity because parenting has been such a tremendous passion for me over the past few years, and I just can't wait to gain more knowledge and skill on how I can guide and just empower other parents that may have been in similar situations as me or need resources in order for themselves to feel like they're good parents. If you missed my live last week related to why I wanted to become a parent coach, I'll go ahead and put that in the link as well. You can see why that's a tremendous passion for me and what has brought me to this journey thus far. Related to being a parent coach, I again have the goal where I want parents to feel empowered by their decisions. I want parents to not feel boxed into certain options that maybe society or someone told them that they had to do for their children. I want each parent to feel like they've made those personal decisions for themselves and for their children. And so this is going to be a very controversial topic. I don't believe it has to go in that direction, but unfortunately, our society makes it that way. And so I would like to respectfully approach this conversation and just let you all know that I don't have any intention of judging people or pointing out things that maybe we agree or disagree with. My question to you all in the topic of parenting and caregiving is spanking ever okay? for your children, ever. And the reason why I put ever is I know so many parents who have said, well, we're not going to spank unless we absolutely have to. Now, another question that I want to attach to that is spanking biblical? And I know that addresses only a particular group of people. A lot of you know that I came from a Protestant evangelical background, and I have so much love and beauty for and appreciation for that upbringing, but there are some things I was told that were biblical, and I really had to ask myself if they were. And so I want to ask all you parents if you really do believe spanking is biblical, and if so, what sort of ideas have led you to believe that that's commanded in the Bible? Now, my whole point of this is one reason why I didn't want to become a mom, is because in my faith-based communities, I heard a lot of parents say that it was biblical to spank children, that God calls us to do that. And I didn't want to be put in that position. I would have rather just not been a mom and not spent time disciplining my child in that way, because that honestly sounded so terrible to me. And that was one thing that actually kept me away from becoming a mother for a very long time. And I want to ask you all, there's a lot of things we say, I believe in this, I believe in that, because it's biblical, because it's this, because it's that. But there's a lot of things we've been told that this is truth, or this is this, or this is that, because we've just been told it is the way it is. And so with a lot of beliefs that you have, I really want you to sit and examine and ask yourself, why do you believe it? Have you really sat down to make a personal conviction for yourself as to why you personally believe things? The answer typically is no, and the reason why is actually a lot of beliefs that we have been passed down genetically. This has been scientifically proven, and so I don't know if you guys feel like there's been things in your upbringing that have been said and you've never questioned it, or just something that's naturally been there. It's probably been in your genetic makeup or just been told to you constantly since you were little. But now, you all as parents or caregivers have the ability to really sit down and think why you want to follow certain ideas or principles for your children. Now, before I go into some of the facts and ideas about spanking, I just want to let you know that if you're a parent who does spank and you've made that as a decision, my intention for this conversation is to not judge you, to not make you feel any kind of shame. Again, the goal of today is I came from a place where I was told this is how it is, this is how you parent, this is how a marriage looks, this is how a family structure looks. And for me, that came a lot from the church. And I was at a place where, honestly, a lot of those structural ideas were not working for my family, were not working for me, were not working for my husband, was not working for my son. And so I really had to ask myself if I believed in those ideas, if I believed that God was even calling me to those ideas, or if some pastor on a pulpit was just telling me that this is what God said to do. And so, related to spanking, I just again want to encourage and ask you guys to really examine why you've made that decision. Do you believe it's the only option? And if that's something you really haven't considered, that there's possibly other options, then maybe this is a good time to think about that as well going forward with spanking or whatever you want to do to address things with your children. And also just thinking with spanking, are you happy with that? Do you like it? I really don't know any parent that would say that they do like spanking. So to even ask if you're really happy or satisfied with that as a must or an option in you and your family's life. So now I'll go ahead and talk about some facts, some common phrases that have been used to justify spanking. And again, my goal is to not judge anybody. If anything, because I'm going to go through training of being a parent coach, I want to empower parents. And there's so much information that's being given to parents these days that I don't think a lot of us have confidence in what we decide to do for our children. And there's a lot of times we really have to step out and just be okay that people are going to glare at us in a grocery store. People are going to roll their eyes at whatever decisions we make for our children. But you are doing what's best for your children. You know your kids. Those people rolling their eyes at your children, they're not raising them. So don't listen to any of that. And figure out what you want to follow and what is really best for your family dynamic. So the first fact that I want to address is, I'm sure you guys have seen this from children. Maybe you are one of these kids, but have you ever experienced or seen a child whose parents are going through a divorce, or at a young age their parent gets cancer, or they experience something very traumatic in their childhood? And a lot of times the kid will grow up, and they'll say it as a child, but they'll grow up thinking this too. They'll say, it's my fault that situation happened. And, you know, I applaud a lot of parents who I know have been splitting up, because I know so many who have done the best that they can to really emphasize to their children that it's not their children's fault for that. We as adults obviously know there are so many different factors outside of our kids that cause relationships to be so difficult. And so that's us, you know, as adults, we're able to have that perspective. But children don't have that perspective. They're egocentric. So what that means is anything that really happens around the life of a child, they somehow believe it involves them. And that's why you'll often hear a child think that parents splitting up is something that is their fault, when really they probably aren't contributing to any of that, really. And so with children being so egocentric, it makes me wonder if spanking is really a good option for that, because spanking is going to bring that egocentric development out in a child, and who knows what they're thinking. They're probably thinking a lot of shameful things about spanking after the results of it. And I know a lot of parents who try to approach spanking well. They try to make sure it's not out of anger. They try to make sure they let the child know what has been the reason for their punishment and such. But the reality is, it's really hard for children to get out of that egocentric thinking, no matter how you try to approach it. Also, a lot of people have thought that cultural norms have maybe changed the perspective of spanking for children, and the reality is there's no supportive evidence that shows that. There was a study of about 17 different countries outside of North America that observed spanking being extremely acceptable in those cultures, and they were thinking that the hypothesis would be that kids would just know that that was natural, that kids would get spanked for whatever they did that they weren't supposed to do. Well, a lot of kids had the same negative, shameful results that children in societies where it's not normal have. And in fact, they were showing a lot more aggression in those societies that were quote unquote normal with spanking. Spanking also raises the risks of problems now and later. And basically, spanking in a lot of research has been linked to more mental health problems. And it's been linked to having more problems and issues with child-parent relationship. And also it's been linked to children having more issues in school. Now, I'll also share some of the resources that I got in the comments so that you guys can go ahead and do your research too and figure out what you'd like to do best, because knowledge is power, right? And so the more knowledge we gain, the more we're able to confidently make a decision in something else. Another issue is that a lot of people think spanking is working, but spanking is actually not working the way that you want it to. So typically a goal for spanking is for the child to comply and for the child to learn a lesson about whatever they're being punished for. But the issue with it is that spanking doesn't bring a behavior for that to be addressed or corrected. And according to theatlantic.com, Andrea Nair, who is a writer, she is an expert on childhood psychotherapy and childhood development. She claims that spanking might scare children into stopping a behavior, but it doesn't get them to have the ability to think rationally about the issue. And it also doesn't give a child the desire to want to cooperate, probably because they are thinking out of a fearful sense of obeying rather than thinking rationally about their action that they're being punished for. And it also prevents people from learning how to manage big emotions and develop conflict skills. So a lot of studies are self-reporting related to spanking, but there is actually a man, an expert named George Holden. What he did is he found a small group, about 15 moms. He gave them digital audio recordings to wear around their neck in order to observe their family life for 6 evenings. He heard a few times when parents would spank their children in the recording, and came to find that 73% of the time, the kids that were spanked ended up doing misbehavior again 10 minutes after the spanking. So if really there's an idea that there's some sort of lesson and attachment to that physical discipline, 73% of the children were not getting it in this study. I've heard a lot of different arguments to justify spanking, and this is where I really want to get into a lot of the faith-based beliefs and biblical teachings and ideas that I've heard about spanking. And to find research on it has been personally freeing for me as a mother, and I hope that you guys can just find freedom in whatever you decide to do for your families too. Now, a lot of people, I'm sure you know that phrase, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I'll hear a lot of parents justify and say that it is biblical to spank because that is in the Bible. That is actually a misquote that happened in the 17th century. A pastor said that, and that just flew along in our society. It's Proverbs 13:24, which actually says, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." So, yeah, that scripture talks about discipline, but it doesn't say anything about sparing a rod, spoiling a child, so it has no implication to a physical form of discipline. If anything, you could possibly read that as just an idea, very poetically, of what discipline possibly looks like. Another issue in the Bible is there's a lot of attachment to the word children and discipline, and people will take that into saying that that justifies physical punishment. But there are actually several words to the word child and children in the Bible. In our society, when we say child, we're thinking, from toddler up to close to adolescence. But the Bible actually has a broad range from child up to an adult that is ready to get married. And so you really actually have to look at what the language is actually addressing when it says children and child. And a lot of them in Proverbs are actually addressing more of the child going into adulthood because, of course, you want to give wisdom to somebody who's about to create their own family, who's about to marry somebody. And so that's where a lot of the wisdom is coming from. And if anything, I think that should say too that a lot of the words about a rod or discipline is to actually be more instruction for the adult child in the situation. Now, I know that a lot of the facts I've given prior to this are research, psychology, science-based, and I know a lot of people will argue with me that they say, well, we follow the Bible, so none of that matters because the Bible is an inherent true book. And if you have that as a belief, great. What I want to caution you and think about is that faith and religion have been at odds for the longest time, and it's time for that to stop because faith and science have been at odds for a very long time, and it's time for that to stop because if you really think about it, there have been so many times where science has been seen in the Bible and faith has been seen in science, and they actually intersect so much in our life so beautifully. And if we open our hearts and our minds to that, we'll be able to actually see that instead of have them be a fighting force, they can actually work together. And that's something that can help us make decisions as well and help us actually really see if something is biblical or not. Another issue is that I've heard a lot of parents in faith-based communities talk about that spanking, discipline is biblical, and that that's something that needs to be taken seriously. I agree that figuring out how to discipline our children does need to be taken seriously. However, a lot of the evidence that parents in faith-based communities get is from Proverbs. There's several different scriptures related to children, related to discipline. And again, related to that is Proverbs is a book on general wisdom. And a lot of people forget to think of that, and they take Proverbs to be like universal commands. And I just want to have you guys really think about that general wisdom and universal commands are very, very different. Another argument I've heard by so many people is, well, I got spanked and I turned out okay. Now, some of my facts might help you with all of that because it is linked to more mental illness for spanking or drug addiction. And I'm not saying that your child that you are possibly spanking now or choose to is going to have any of those issues. They may not. They may turn out fine and they may turn out okay. But really, I want to ask you all, what is the definition of okay? Because I really don't know if someone is 100% okay. And if we're seeing research of more negative ideas and results from spanking, and we want someone to turn out okay, is that going to really help contribute to that? Or are there other methods we can do for someone to turn out okay without the spanking? The only thing I can really say about that is the shame I recall from spanking. I was a very sensitive child. Some of you know my Enneagram number is a type 4, and it's so true. I was a type 4 toddler all the way, but when I got spanked, I had so much shame about it, and I still can remember the times I got spanked, and I can remember the shame. I can even experience it right now as I speak to you all, and I can't even tell you what I got spanked for, but I can tell you what I felt. And so I think that has been something that I've really considered in parenting, is to remember those moments of how I felt shame as a child, and if that's something that I might possibly be contributing with related to how I felt when I got spanked. I also just want to address that there's a lot of words in our society that have gotten a new nuance and overtone to it, and the word discipline is one of them. Discipline has gotten this harsh overtone which can be so disturbing to really run into constantly, and especially in faith-based communities. I know a lot of parents have asked me, and I've asked several parents, hey, how have you decided to discipline your children? And I have been guilty in the past of that having such a negative tone to it, because when I hear the word discipline, or at least when I used to, that meant scolding your child, yelling at them, spanking them. And really the reality is discipline comes from the word disciple. You know, Jesus had 12 disciples and they called him teacher the majority of the time. And it really makes me think, you know, when you think of like an internship or an apprenticeship, you're being discipled. Is someone spanking you or yelling at you? No, they're trying to teach you the trade. They're trying to teach you the way. If they see that you need some correction, they're trying to find a way to guide you in order to see whatever needs to be seen at that point. And so the word discipline has just taken this harsh overtone generally in society, but I also see it in faith-based communities where I come from. And I just want to encourage you all, especially in those faith-based communities, that when someone asks you how you discipline your child, that really, I guess a better perspective is to see it as, how are you guiding your children? Do you see that? Do you see what I did? I just took a word that has had such a negative idea to it, and I went back to it being very positive, and I changed my mindset on that word, and I've been able to open my mind to what discipline is. And so I want to just encourage you all too, that you can do that too, because discipline wasn't meant to be such a harsh word. Another argument I've heard is that spanking is okay as long as it's not out of anger. This is a big biblical evangelical defense that has come out of spanking, and I really want to let you guys know that it's actually not biblical to spank a child when it's not out of anger, because a lot of people say that we are trying to reflect and follow in the image of God. And the reality is, a lot of the punishments in the Bible from God was out of the wrath of God, out of the anger of God. And so there's no biblical idea of spanking being appropriate when it's not out of anger. And if anything, that's not literally following the Bible too. Now, even let's just say you never spanked out of anger, you never do. If so, is this a deliberate discipline strategy? Well, the thing is, I don't think it's going to make a difference for your child whether you spank out of anger or whether you don't. Because again, we've talked about children being egocentric. We've talked about the goals that people have for spanking, research showing that children are not really learning their lesson through it. And so I think whether you approach spanking in an angry way or in a place where you're not angry, your child is still gonna be scared of the physical punishment that's about to happen. I want to thank you all for just tuning into this topic. I know it's a doozy. I know it's very controversial. Again, my intention to become a future parent coach is to not judge you on this. If anything, I remember being in a place where I thought spanking was my only option. I thought several parent methods were my only option, and I've come to learn that that's not the case at all. I came in faith-based communities where a pastor will say, this is the structure of a family, this is a structure of discipline, this is a structure of parenting, and a lot of that just did not work out for me. And so if you're in that place where you're trying to follow these structures and you're just banging your head against the wall because your children aren't responding to it, or it just doesn't work out with your family dynamics, it's okay. There's probably a reason for that. And I want to empower you all that it doesn't mean you don't love God if that dynamic isn't working for you. It just means that maybe God's trying to show you a different path to how that certain issue needs to be addressed within your family so that you can have more peace and calmness and still really have joy in knowing that you're following the Lord and that you don't have to feel any guilt with that. So, what do you all think about spanking? And who told you that it was potentially the only option for you and your family? Was that something that your parents, your grandparents said? Was that something from the church? Was that something just you've heard generally from society? So really, who told you that spanking was a discipline and possibly an only option for you? Is this something you decided on your own with you and your partner or whoever is involved with helping raise your kids? Or is this something that people have influenced you towards? And then what changes have you realized and mindset shifts have come when I just discussed that the word discipline has been way too harshly defined, and actually we can change that to go back to what it actually needs to be defined as? What has that done for you? What knowledge, what peace has it brought to you? I want to close off with a quote again from Andrea Nair. She says, "Every child has the right to reach their highest potential and to not be harmed at the hand of their parent. The rest of the world can have the job of giving kids a thick skin. She continues on to say, but over the course of my career, I've come to believe that if a parent has the most dire of circumstances, but over the course of my career, I've come to believe that if a parent has the support, time, and resources to learn alternatives, spanking could be avoided even in the most dire of circumstances. Surely policymakers in all states should be focusing on educating parents about alternatives rather than sanctioning a practice that, through its connections of mental illness and addiction, can further stack the deck against children who are already at a social economic disadvantage. Again, thank you so much for tuning into this topic. If you all have any more resources or questions or want to just talk more about this issue of spanking, you're welcome to DM me. I'm more than happy and open to talk with you all about it. And again, with my announcements, remember that I'm supporting Lincoln Cooper right now. I will put the link to his GoFundMe so that you can check out and see it. I will also put a link to my Linktree, which has Lincoln Cooper's GoFundMe, including my Lime Life shop. Again, 50% of my proceeds for the month of July are going to go to Lincoln Cooper's treatment that's currently happening right now. And with that, it's also a benefit for you because you get some really good skincare or makeup care. And again, if you have any questions with that, I'm a beauty guide, so I'm here to help you on that journey on what's best to match your skin tone, and the like. And again, there's still time to enter my Christmas in July giveaway. If you're interested in that, please go ahead and DM me. You're welcome to DM me under my Instagram, Bodacious Biffy, or to find me under Biffy Ipple and DM me that way to figure out how to get into the contest. All right, all my love, joy, peace, and abundance to you guys. Take care.